Here we go.
Excellent.
All right. So I'm just going to pop this link in there to make sure that everyone has it.
Yeah.
All right. Well, end of the year, Preparing the Unprepared. This is the final episode for the first series. And this particular discussion is going to be focused on the responsibilities of a technical hiring manager. Now, this is a question that even technical hiring managers seems to be asking themselves these days. And if they're not clear on what they're supposed to be focusing on, how do they expect anyone else to actually align? So to help answer this question, Preparing the Unprepared has reached kind of far and wide to find a perfect guest who has got experience on both the good side of the hiring process and the bad. So to do that, I'm going to be joined by Andrew Beacock, who's the software engineering manager at very.co.uk. Welcome to the show, Andrew.
Thank you very much, Lewis. Thank you for having me on.
No problem. So I'm a kind of give the audience a quick intro into your background, then maybe you can elaborate on it. So you came from a full stack software engineering background for 25, originally, and you've been in the industry for over 25 years. You currently are the software engineering manager at very.co.uk, and you've got a large team of front and back end engineers that work alongside yourself. Could you elaborate on that slightly, give some more insight into what kind of stuff you guys are doing and what your role is within the business?
Yeah, sure. Yeah. So I work for the Very Group, who basically came out of old catalogue businesses in the UK, the sort of, thumb through a big inch thick book of pictures, picking out what you wanted and write down the code, send them off. So the company's sort of 150 years old and has been doing that a long time. And quite a while ago, they decided, online retail is where it is. And so very.co.uk is a very, very large e-commerce system where you can basically buy our products. We no longer do catalogs. I think the last catalog got produced in 2015, but no one really used them anymore. So we've now, we have the website and we also have Android and iOS apps. The business has got a lot of other parts. So part of the business is to do with financial credit and giving customers credit so that they can buy stuff without needing to pay cash.
Right.
So there's a large amount of financial services and financial industry within the company. But I'm focused in the area very much around the e-commerce side, and it has the vast majority of the engineering capability within the company. So I'm software engineering manager. I've been there just over a year, and I've got 40 engineers in my team. And as you say, it's a mixture of back end, front end, mobile, iOS, React, Java, whole mixture of different capabilities.
Yeah, fair to say that during your time at this business, it's been a pretty rocky year as well. So to build and maintain a group of 40 plus people must have been quite difficult.
Yeah, it was. So I started in January as a principal engineer, but I don't think my manager at the time really had a particular idea of what he was going to use me for, I guess. So I spent a few weeks moving around the different teams, seeing what they did, looked at ways of working, etc. And then in March was made engineering manager of the group. And then 2 weeks later, we're all mobilized home because coronavirus is hitting the UK. And I had to very quickly try and figure out how to get to know 40 engineers via Teams and email and Slack, rather than actually meeting with them face to face. I knew a few of them in my first few weeks. And luckily we'd had some minor interactions, but skill set and people's personalities and stuff was like, it was really a real learning curve at that point.
Yeah, but now with that being said, it wasn't necessarily your first time leading a team, right? But
no,
but a considerably bigger team than you've led in the past.
Yeah, so I think apart from my first 2 or 3 years of my career, I've been sort of a team leader, generally sort of hands-on practitioner / team lead for whatever group. They were normally around 4 or 5 engineers, with me being the lead engineer. And then when I moved to Nokia, I had a team of about 10 at that point, and I took over the line management responsibilities as well for those 10. Following that, smaller teams again, and then going to Very is now sort of almost, quadrupling that up to 40 people. So sort of now I'm managing managers as such. So there's a difference there as well in how you manage those people.
Yeah. And you've actually been quite experienced working remotely. You almost a decade.
Yeah. Yeah. So, I mean, my last role before I joined Very, I was there for just under 12 years, and that was a purely remote role. The company was on the Isle of Man. I was working from Lancashire in the UK, and there was a few of us who were remote. So I'm basically for half my career now, I've worked completely remotely from home. So it's sort of the working from home was absolutely fine in March. It was the fact that you couldn't socialize outside of work that was a real weird part, and I had to kind of help my team and the rest of the company, really, or the rest of our department and our area, to say this isn't normal remote working. This is kind of odd, because I know what remote working's like, and this is really quite strange.
Yeah. So that particular group wasn't remote prior to COVID.
No, the very group has always been collaboration and co-location was their kind of phrase, with the occasional maybe one day a week working from home, maybe not. And then in March, it was like, right, everyone's completely remote. Company before, they had a load of employees on the Isle of Man, but because they were struggling to hire Java engineers on the Isle of Man, they pushed it out into the UK to offer 100% remote.
Right.
So there was a small subset of us in my last place that were completely remote, and then the rest were all office-based.
Interesting. I think there's a lot of forward-facing roles or forward-facing people that might have struggled going into a remote position. I was one of them initially, right? Sales is a difficult space to be, or recruitment, should I say, when you don't have people around you to kind of bounce off and learn from. With the kind of engineering space or technology space, people are a little bit more used to working siloed, right, or on their own.
Yeah.
So whilst it presented a lot of different challenges, was the workload affected by people actually working remote? Or
well, yeah, so it was interesting. So because Very was pretty much, you're in the office, you do your work in the office, and it was a really lively environment. It was a very exciting office to go into after being remote for 12 years. To then go into a lively office with lots of stuff going on was really quite exciting. But what we found is once people had gone home, from an engineering side, we actually either hit the dates or started to exceed them, because the engineers could just crack on, nice and quiet, bit of music on in the background, and they could just code away. So we actually found that we had productivity gains by having them remote, and the company has now changed their policy, and across the entire company, so all disciplines, not just engineering, they're looking at a 50-50 balance of work and office. And for the engineering ones, and specifically our area, we're looking for even less office-based, maybe one day a week, possibly two. And that's one of the things that the message we're sending out when we're hiring as well. So it's actually allowing us to look further afield, because if someone's got to travel 60 miles for one day a week, they'll do that.
Yeah.
But they wouldn't do that every day. But for one day a week, they'd be happy to do that. So we're actually able to kind of throw our net a bit wider and get some more talent.
Absolutely. So appreciate the overview. Now, the purpose of this discussion is to talk about the responsibilities of a technical hiring manager. You kind of just mentioned hiring there. There's a couple of areas that me and you are both kind of wanting to cover, which is just around of onboarding, hiring, and then the benefits of having a forward-facing technical hiring manager in your business or in your team. Now, it seems like a silly question, but and to me it is, because I don't get why there isn't an obvious answer. But what is the responsibility as a technical hiring manager, and how much of how much should you be focused on actual hiring itself in that role?
I mean, as an engineering manager, and if you just purely say, right, you're the manager role, so ignore any technical leadership or any kind of hands-on side of things, because some technical roles are a blend. But if we're just looking at that engineering manager side, to me, the hiring, retention, and growing of your team is basically your number one priority. The strength of your engineering capability is purely based on your attitude to hiring, training, retention, and looking after your team, and trying your best to look after your team within the confines that you're given within the company. It's odd, and I know we've had a little bit of pre-discussions. It's very odd that it's often in engineering, for engineering managers or people who've become engineering managers, they see hiring as a burden. And don't focus on it. And it's sort of it's a part of the job that they'd rather not do, but it's got to be seen the other way around. I consider it one of my number one priorities. I'm involved in the CV sifting process. I'm involved in not all of the first contacts with clients once they go through a screen, a little initial call with our internal recruitment team. But it's either myself or one of my trusted senior engineers to have the chat with them. I'm always involved in that final interview where we do the technical skills and also the people skills side, because I want to know who's coming into my department. I want to know what makes them tick, so I can figure out which is the best of my squads to put them in, which needs their technical ability, but also their personality or their alternative skills, their softer skills will be a good fit for that team. So I get involved in it as much as I can. And, at the moment, there's not a lot of, we've got a lot of vacancies, but we're not getting a lot of applications through because not many people are wanting to move jobs right now because of the pandemic. If you're in a comfortable role with healthcare benefits and things like that, why would you give that up to move somewhere else? But so if the hiring ramps up a lot, then we'll have to figure out how I start to distribute that out wider. But I've got a good set of trusted engineers that I involve in the interview process, and they also consider it one of their highest priorities. So if an interview happens to be on a certain meeting, they'll move that other meeting or cancel that meeting or put somebody else in so that they can attend the interviews.
Yeah, there's something to be said for. I feel like it falls short sometimes because people get hired into a leadership role and they haven't come from a background in people management. So they might have been the most technical or the most senior engineer on the team. And now all of a sudden they're looking after a team of 5 or 10 people with a mandate to hire another 5 or 10. And they actually don't know. They literally don't know that your role is no longer as focused on the technical. It's more focused on bringing in other technical talent that can take some of that workload on. Yeah,
and that's one of the sort of sadder parts, I guess, is that to progress as an engineer through your career, you do often end up at a point where you have to say, right, I'm going to go down a management route now because that's the only way to get promoted or to kind of grow in the company. Some companies have figured it out. I worked for Nokia in 2001, and they had a progression track that you could stay technical and go all the way up to basically just below board level as a pure engineering sole contributor. You'd end up, principal architect or something, I think it was at that point. Or you could go down a management route instead, and you'd end up as like a department manager or an engineering manager or an engineering director. And then there was that jump into the C-suite. So Nokia had it completely mapped out. So you could change direction at any point. It wasn't like, oh, I'm sorry, you're a sole contributor for the rest of your days here. But a lot of companies don't have that. And so I think a lot of engineering managers are engineers who don't want to manage. Yeah, I'd agree. Having a hiring strategy seems to be really good as a foundational point when you actually, find yourself in a position like this. So actually figuring out where someone can be long-term, what does their career plan look like? And then how are you going to hire into that? So I wanted to ask a little bit more, because we've discussed this before, about your experience having joined, let's say, Very. What was that like for you? Yeah, so if I wind back to the interview process, so first of all, kind of went in for a half an hour coffee chat, met a number of different people, met my my manager as such, had a really good chat with him. That went really well. Got shown a little bit around the building, just as a casual bit, not like a proper tour or anything like that. And that was really quite good. Got feedback later on that day. Yes, they want to take you forward for a proper face-to-face interview. But that took a very long time to get scheduled. Probably, I think it was about 2 weeks later after the coffee chat that I actually then went in, and I was only in for an hour. It wasn't like an all-day thing. I went in for an hour. And then it took an awful long time after that to actually get to the point of they've made a decision. I think it was, again, about another 2 weeks, 3 weeks after. So it was, from me as a candidate, it was a very long process, because you're waiting for 2 or 3 weeks to say, have you actually got the job? You get some feedback saying they like you, you're in the running. There's some other interviews to happen yet. and then you don't hear anything, and then it hits a Friday, and then you get demoralized, and then it gets to Monday and stuff. So anyway, in the end, obviously the offer came through, and I started in the January. But although I'd confirmed my start date and everything with the talent acquisition team, and therefore HR and everyone knew when I was starting, I'm not sure what happened, but my manager didn't know I was starting. So I went in on like the first Monday after New Year, and my manager sort of, and I'm sat in the foyer.
What are you doing here?
Yeah, and then, well, my manager comes in. I recognized him, and he kind of walked in the building with his coat on and disappeared off. And then, kind of 5 minutes later, hurried down and went, "Oh, sorry. How long have you been here?" I'm like, half an hour, sat in the lobby, just waiting. And he hadn't been informed, and so didn't know I was starting. Thought I was starting the week later. And so then at that point, the whole onboarding process just kind of went to bits, because, you know, you've got to order the kit. The kit's got to get provisioned. Your laptop's got to get set up. You've got to get your monitor and all those things. So I did end up with, I think at the end of my first day, I did have my security pass, so I could get back in the building on day 2. And by about day 3 or day 4, I had a loaner laptop, some ancient thing that I could just about do email on. And then I think it was 6 weeks before I actually got my own laptop and proper access to stuff. And very much, and after about 3 weeks, they've got like an internal IT department thing, and it was the guy from the IT department part was wandering around, spotted the sticker on my laptop that says like loaner laptop, and said, "You've had that longer than 2 weeks, give it back." And I'm like, "Well, you can't take that off me because I haven't got one." And he's like, "That's not my problem, that's your manager's problem." And I'm like, "You're not taking it." Holding on to this laptop dear life.
Wow.
Because otherwise I wasn't even going to be able to access email. So it was, it wasn't a great start. And then, and I understood, for the next bit, I understand why, but because it's quite a large company and we hire a lot of people, like every Monday, more people would arrive. And in January and February, there was a massive hiring program going on. We had, several hundred vacancies for stuff. We were really trying to grow the business a lot. So there would be a company induction, but they were done once a month. So I'd been there 3 weeks or 4 weeks. And then you get an induction that says, "Welcome to Very. Here's where the toilets are. Here's how the HR systems works. Here's how your benefits and pension work." Most of us had already set it all up and figured it out because you got access to it in your first week. So it was like, there was just certain bits of the process which you could understand for a large volume of people. Doing these things every day would be difficult. But I don't know. I definitely saw a lot of room for improvement when I was being onboarded myself, to see how it could be done.
That's not. That doesn't sound like an unfamiliar story. Obviously, having been in recruitment for over 10 years now, I hear that a lot. And actually, what's kind of disappointing is that businesses don't put enough focus on the hiring process from beginning to end. So, firstly, you mentioned being involved in the process as a hiring manager. Super important, and I think it's super important in the interim between someone leaving their job and joining your business as well, to stay in touch with them. Yeah. Secondly, that is the first thing that anyone who's going to join your business sees. That sets the tone. It screams worlds about what it might be like to work for this business. And if you get it wrong, it could actually turn what was once a really positive experience into something really negative.
Yeah.
Yeah, and that time frame, the time frame's a bit I've never understood, and I just don't know why. You've done really well in the process. You're like our number one candidate. We're just, we're just about to make a decision on you, then silence.
Yeah,
2 or 3 weeks. It's like, what happened? Where did everyone go?
Yeah, exactly. And sometimes when you are hiring, the candidate unfortunately isn't necessarily your primary concern all day, every day. You've got business needs, you've got emergency issues to address, your own, more interviews to handle, more CVs to recruit. So they are at that point another number in the system.
Yeah.
But it's important to just try and refocus every now and again and say, you know what, actually, I've not been in contact with that person for a few days now. They're awaiting a decision. from us. Maybe I'm not in a position to make it yet. I've had to request additional budgetary approval or sort of exemplary salary range or something, or we're just trying to get some of the benefits sorted, or there's another candidate in the running and there's two excellent candidates and we can only pick one. But I just try to remember to kind of reach out and say, hope you're okay. We are still really interested, trying to sort a few things out and be as honest and open and honest as possible without obviously compromising any situations or any company confidentiality.
Yeah, of course.
And then also keeping in touch with people between the acceptance of offer and their start date. I find I track people down on LinkedIn, and that's how I contact the candidates through LinkedIn. Once they're accepted, I don't email them and stuff. I ping them messages on LinkedIn. Most people are using that.
Personable as well.
Yeah, and generally just how are you? How's things going? And also I also there's we use a lot of AWS services,
right?
And there's an excellent free AWS course that kind of just covers all aspects of AWS stuff, and it's about 6 hours worth, I think, of videos. So after a month or so, I then send them a link to that, and I say, if you're interested, and there's no obligation, but if you're interested, work your way through this course because it will give you a really good background into all the services, and we do use a lot of them here. So so I'm not necessarily
giving them though. It's that touch point.
Yeah. I'm not giving them necessarily, I am giving them work to do, but I'm not expecting them to do it. If they showed up on the first day and said, didn't get round to it, that's no negative mark at all. It's just, I'm just trying to kind of bring them into what we're doing here and the engineering skills and capabilities they'd need so that when they do come in, they start to feel familiar with the technology around them. And also with me as well. Just to backtrack a little bit, the induction sessions that were run by Very are excellent. And they've got all sorts of different people from the business in. They explain how all the business works and operates. I'm not sure how frequently they could do them because of the effort that goes into organizing them. And there's some pretty senior people involved, and they do kind of get involved and meet the new people, which is really great. So I don't know how you speed that process up to make it more flexible or fluid, but having it 4 weeks after I started, a lot of what the material that was covered was at that point irrelevant. So it's an interesting one for that onboarding.
I want to stress the importance here as well of being a good hiring manager, and I'm hopeful that you'll agree with this. A lot of the time, certainly from what I've seen in the R&D or the engineering world, people join businesses for the team or the person that's leading those teams. So regardless of the company, that means that if you focus on giving the candidate or the applicant a good experience, whether they're successful or not, for your own career, when you move somewhere else, that person might want to come and work with you.
Yeah.
They've now got 4 more years experience, and actually they're really good. But if you don't show interest, or you're not personable, or you don't make them feel good throughout the process, successful or not, the likelihood of them going, oh yeah, I really want to work for that business. Oh, but wait, Andrew's the leader there. I had a really bad experience with him before. All of a sudden, you've lost someone who might be a really good candidate. So there's so much importance around you being involved in a process and thinking almost selfishly of your future career and how not just putting that little bit extra in or having those few touch points that really don't take a lot of time.
Yeah, to address that bit, so our general interview process for, say, a sort of senior or principal level engineer, who are kind of our higher graded engineers. I know it's sort of different in different companies, the words they use. So we have about I have a half an hour telephone chat with the candidate first of all. It's mostly just how are you, what are you, what have you done? I don't really particularly pick through their CV. I just ask them, what are you doing now? What do you want to do? I talk a bit about how we're structured and the usual, a bit of company spiel, but not too much. Then we move to, at that point, we then often then do a sort of half an hour to an hour sort of face-to-face, winding back. So we do the 20-minute, half an hour chat. If they pass that, we then actually have an outsourced kind of pair programming test person who is a consultant that we use. So I know some companies set technical tests for people to do over a weekend, and they have to upskill in 25 new technologies and spend hours and stuff. And we really don't like those at Very at all. We don't see much value in setting someone homework. But what we do see value in is them working with someone to solve a problem. So we use this this consultant that we know because not only is he very personable and very likable as a person, he also gives us a sort of objective view from outside the company. So, you know, what's this person like? And he could be very objective with his decisions and what he says about the person. And he basically works with them for about an hour or so. They do a pair programming puzzle. They have a bit of a chat and stuff. And then after that, we then do around an hour of technical interview where we go through their CV, picking stuff, asking them quite difficult questions about AWS and Java or React or whatever. And we did have one chap who, I mean, he did great in the interview process, and we've hired him. And he said when he started, when I onboarded him, he said it was the best interview process he'd ever had, and he's a very nervous person. And he said within the first telephone chat, he felt completely at ease, and he could relax and give the answers. And I thought, we've put you through a telephone interview. You've met with some external expert, and then you've come and met 3 other people via a Teams call because it was all remote. And he found it quite relaxing. And I thought, that's what we want, because we want people to be relaxed so that they're their true selves, and they can also have a bit of breathing space to think about the answers of the questions, or think about the questions they want to ask us, rather than feeling under pressure, or that actually it's a really harsh interview process. And yeah, we got some really good feedback from him, and he's slotted in great, and he's doing really, really well.
I mean, obviously the idea of an interview process is to assess someone's fit and skills, right? But you want to try and keep it as realistic as possible as well. Sometimes I see interview processes that just do pile on way too much pressure. Yeah. And if that's the kind of environment that you're trying to promote, then fine. You know, if you're looking at quant finance, then maybe it is going to be real high pressure. But some of them, it's just unnecessary.
Well, I mean, I've had that myself as a candidate in a previous job. I applied for this job, and they were very, very, very serious, really grilling answers and questions and stuff. And I felt like I had to start to pretend to be somebody I wasn't. I had to try and, you know, it's like, oh no, I know this stuff. Yeah, I know all that. And you almost start not making things up, but you know, you're not your true self at that point, because you feel like you can't say, I'm sorry, I don't know. And that's a really powerful bit, actually, from a candidate. When a candidate says, I'm sorry, I don't know that, we go, that's fine. We'll just move away from grilling you on it then. But if you feel you have to give an answer, and then it's not the right answer, the interviewees will then start to drill further, and you go down a rabbit hole.
Yes, do you know, it's crazy to think, because there's probably a lot of really good candidates that, if they felt comfortable enough to say, oh, this just isn't something I know well enough, but actually this is what I know. Yeah. And then they went into depth on the stuff they do know. There could have been some potential there for someone to say, well, it's not going to take long for this guy or girl to pick it up if they're, you know, that in tune with this part, where we can teach them that part. Interesting. Yeah. The candidate experience, that's a super important part for a technical hiring manager to get right.
Yeah. I think the other bit as well is the onboarding. It's when they start is absolutely crucial. So based on my onboarding process or lack of, I then had to help onboard when I wasn't the manager yet. I had to help onboard another person. I was kind of called down that, you know, Mike's in the lobby. I'm like, right. And they're like, can you come and meet him? I'm like, well, why am I meeting him? I'm not engineering manager. I'm just Mr. Engineer or whatever. Yeah. Your boss isn't in. Can you come and meet him? So I quickly have a word with one of the other senior engineers, and I go, has he got any kit ordered? And he goes, I'll have a quick look on the system. He goes, it's nothing. Like nothing's been set up. So I said, right, you know how to order this kit, don't you? I said, right, you get the kit ordered, get access stuff, quickly get the emails off to get all of his account things. I'll go downstairs and I'll sit with him for like an hour or so, having a coffee in the coffee shop in the foyer, and I'll get to know him and chat to him. And it was complete smoke and mirrors. But by the end of the first day, he had a security pass and a loaner laptop. So that was a win. By day 2, he was fully set up on all the systems, because we've kind of gone, this is really high priority. So all the various people kicked into action. And it's a lot of email-based kind of access that you need to ask. And by the end of the first week, he had his proper laptop all configured, all set up. And he went, "Yep." He said, "My onboarding's been really smooth," and it was, but it was the duck paddling.
Little did you know. And I think with that being said as well, if you wasn't someone who was able to think on your feet, that could actually put you in quite a tricky position as someone who's already on the team, right?
Yeah.
Like quite an uncomfortable position. You might not be someone who can confidently go and just talk to someone you've never known before and buy time or blow smoke and mirrors, as you say.
Yeah.
It's so important to get that part of the process right as well. And is that something you have in black and white now? Is that something that you've kind of nailed down or narrowed down?
I don't know about black and white, but I pretty much at that point I thought, right, we're hiring more people, we're interviewing more people, and then shortly after this engineer joined, I was then made engineering manager. So now they are my responsibility. So I documented all the steps that we used to get all of his equipment and access and everything sorted. Then I documented how do you get access to the gym, a car parking pass,
simple thing,
benefits, all the stuff that you do in your first few weeks. But I documented it all. It was all on Confluence on the wiki. And then as I hired each person, I started rearranging the sections so there would be a natural flow through. And then now, so we've hired about 8 people since. So hiring stopped in March.
Yeah, of course.
Just completely stopped. Started up again about July. And now it's like, right, we've offered somebody, I send off the request for the kit. I just get everything sorted so that, I found little loopholes out. Like I needed a magic employee number to put in the laptop request system, but the laptops can take 3 weeks, but contractors can start within a week. And so I spoke to the laptop guys and I'm like, I can't get you the number quick enough. That's why I'm giving you all these last minute urgent requests that you don't like. And they went, just put TBC in the number. And I went, can I do that? And they went, yeah, as long as you know they're starting, TBC is fine. We don't need the number, but it was on the form. So from then on, great. So if you were hiring Lewis/TBC.
2-3 weeks.
Yeah. And then the laptop, they're not in a hurry then with the laptop. So they're not getting stressed and annoyed by me putting these requests in. So everyone can chill out a bit and just do a good job. And then I meet, when the engineer starts, I was traveling into the office. The office is still open, but kind of restricted reasons really for being in there. But obviously getting your laptop and your kit. So I'd go in and meet the person. I'd actually meet the new engineer at like 9 o'clock. We'd have a coffee. We'd get his laptop. I'd then run through all the equipment tests. We'd do a test Teams call. We'd sign up for Slack, get on Bitbucket, get them the code, all the different aspects and systems they need. I'd sit with them and we'd go through it together. I'd show them this wiki page for all the benefits. And not only have we had a good catch up and a bit of a chat and get to know each other, I know that after, it's about 3 hours I've got it down to now. After 3 hours, they jump in their car and drive home. I know that when they plug into their internet at home, they're going to be online.
Yep.
And in that afternoon, I've already got a 2 to 3 hour session lined up with their team leader, who's one of my direct reports. I've already got a session with them lined up. So, and at that point, I step away. So, once I'm in the car heading back home after that, that's the onboarding done. But it's about 3 to 4 hours and nice and relaxed, get to know them, buy them a coffee, get the laptop sorted and everything. And yeah, I've had some really good feedback from people saying, yeah, smoothest onboarding ever and fastest. That, these are, regardless of whether they're perm or contract, these are expensive people. Costs a lot of money to have engineers around, and we want to make sure that they can get up to speed as soon as possible. And they want to get up to speed as soon as possible.
Of course.
They don't want to be sat at home going, what am I meant to be doing? Or I haven't got a laptop or a headset or something.
It's interesting because I didn't realize we were going to go down this route, because I guess the question that kind of keeps circling in my head is I think technical hiring managers were going, well, whose responsibility is that? That sounds like administration, or that sounds like HR. When what you're saying is actually, and Very's a big company, you've got a big group, right? You're saying that there's huge benefit in making it your responsibility.
Massive. Yeah, massive. I know that one of my new engineers into my team is going to be happy and productive by that afternoon. They'll be meeting with their manager and it's a few emails and a few forms, but you've just got to do them at certain points in the process, and you've got to be focused on them. You can't leave it until the Friday before they start going, oh yeah, I'd better get those systems in. You've got to be on top of it. But once, it's not actually a huge amount of effort. And that 3 hours means I now know exactly who that engineer is, what their personality's like, how they take their coffee.
Yeah. Exactly.
But also, what makes them tick and what have they done in the past. And and then it means I've got an easy contact point if I need to ask them anything, or they can ask me. It's it's a really enjoyable 3 hours. It's not hard work. It's a nice way of doing it. And I just block out the morning, move some meetings around, block the morning out, and just dedicate it on them.
Yeah. It's interesting when hiring managers that I've worked with in the past say, I haven't got time for that. When actually, in your case, for example, because that perhaps there wasn't enough time put into it, you ended up 6 weeks in and still going, well, what am I supposed to be doing?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, it was
time you saved there, like 3 or 4 weeks worth of work or getting up to speed. Like, that's huge. Again, like you said, these guys and girls are expensive.
Yeah.
So having someone sit there for 4 or 5 weeks doing nothing is quite a large cost.
Yeah. And also if you haven't set somebody up properly on a system, or you haven't tested it, and then they've just driven 2 to 3 hours home, and then they find out they can't make a Teams call, or the headset you've given them doesn't work, and stupid things like that, then not only will they not be doing anything the rest of the afternoon, they've then got to come back in. We've got to figure out replacements and stuff. So it's like, let's just get it all tested now. And then I know that when you get in the car, there's no reason, other than your own internet connection at home, there's no reason why you won't be sort of online and able to communicate and get on with things. And after that, we can sort everything else out. If there's any other issues with stuff, we can sort it out because we can communicate.
Absolutely. Like that. So I wanted also to touch on the offer process, Andrew. You mentioned that you waited a few weeks for yours. I've seen 2 or 3 months sometimes, and then all of a sudden, we want to hire that candidate. I'm like, what? That candidate's gone. They accepted another role 2 months ago.
Yes.
I want to get your opinion on what is the best way to manage that. And again, how involved does a technical hiring manager need to be in this part of the process?
Well, we're quite fortunate at Very, so we've got our own internal talent acquisition team. So we don't use recruiting agents for permanent staff. We do for contract, and we have a particular contract agency that we use. But for permanent hires, we have internal talent acquisition. So we're very fortunate that they create a really good connection with the candidate from the start. They're the ones that do the initial CV sifting, figuring out salary requirements and where somebody wants to go in their career, to then match them to the different areas. Because as I said, we've got e-commerce, but that's just one small part. We've got a logistics and warehousing team, which is full of engineers. We've got financial service stuff, and we've got retail. So there's actually a number of different places that engineers can go based on their skill set. So they do that initial filtering as well. But the whole time they do a lot of calls with the candidates, so that's good. From an interview process, I try my best to see if we can kind of keep it each stage quite close together. Sometimes they drag out, and it's all because certain availability of people doesn't happen, and it's now a week later or something. But I really try to get the telephone interview, and then the tech test if required, and then the final sort of face-to-face technical and personal interview. If we can do all 3 of those in a week, then we're doing well and we're pleased. But that's the kind of aim. That's our goal, is to try and do those 3 parts in a week. And then really I catch up with the other interviewers straight after that final interview, and we make a decision there and then on whether we're going to hire or not. And then if we are, then I get straight back in touch with the talent acquisition team and I say, we want to hire them. And as long as the salary, expected salary sits within our ranges, I just leave. They do that negotiation. I don't get involved in that.
Right.
If their salary demands start to go outside of certain brackets, then obviously we have to get involved to make a call on, are they going to be worth sort of requesting additional budget, or do we, are they being a little bit unrealistic compared to what we think? But generally we are turning that around pretty quickly. But the bit that we stumble over, and I don't know if we can speed this up, is we then do some background checks, and you do like a I can't remember what it's called in the States, but there's basically a bit of a background check to basically make sure you've not been to jail, you're not You're not expected to go to court soon. And they can take a couple of days, which often you've just had a discussion about salary with a candidate. You say, right, great, we'd like to offer you the role. Then they don't get a contract for a few days because we need the results of these checks before we offer them the contract. So we have to kind of keep in touch and make sure we keep them warm at that point.
Transparency, yeah, just communicating.
Yeah, but that's the crucial point we found. Yeah, we found that if we don't keep in touch with them as those checks are going on, and especially if they span over a weekend or something, so it can then be 4 or 5 days, sometimes you get the candidates at that point with itchy feet because they're thinking, well, where's the contract? And that's a very dangerous point. So our talent team make sure they keep in touch and keep them informed in what's going on.
I'm keen to know, so I think you touched on a few of the potential reasons for a delay in any part of the process, but also the offer stage. What things happen behind closed doors because it's not just as simple as going, okay, well, let's offer this guy and put the offer out right now. And I've seen that in some companies. I actually have seen that 4 or 5 years ago. I think probably things have become a little bit tighter now, but what things internally can cause a delay?
I mean, even just in the interview process part, it's just the availability of candidates. As with any large company, we're very meeting heavy, and just trying to get the right people in the right room at a time that lines up with the candidate can be really hard work. So that can really start to stretch things out at that point, because I've got certain sort of trusted engineers that I really value their opinion and they're very good in the interview process, and I want them involved. But if I can't get hold of them, then you're like, do you push it out to wait for them because you know it'll be really good? Do you go with somebody else? And I'm always involving new people, new engineers into the loop so that we kind of almost have a rotating door policy of training people up on how to interview. The other one as well is it sometimes depends. We're very lucky right now because we need a lot of engineers. So we're not just after a team leader. Mm-hmm. We're after 3 team leaders and 5 back-end engineers and 6 front-end engineers. So we have the leeway to almost offer straight away because we've got more than one position.
Yeah.
If you've just got one position, though, sometimes there's that thought of, well, will a better CV show up?
That's an interesting point. Do you wait for that?
I don't. My view, and this sometimes annoys people or annoys hiring processes. My view is that they need to be the right candidate, not the best of a bad bunch.
Okay.
So sometimes, if you get 6 CVs for a position, you might whittle it down to 2, and then you say, yeah, we'll go with this person. They did the best out of all the ones we interviewed. But there's been times in the past when I was on the interview process, but I wasn't in charge of the decision. And I said, don't hire that guy. He's not right. And they said, well, he's the best of the ones we've got, so we're going to hire him. I'm like, don't hire him. Please don't hire him. 9 months later, HR are getting involved, and it was really quite unpleasant. And, there was a lot of bad things said on both sides by the appropriate people and stuff. And it just didn't work out. And it's making sure that candidate is the right candidate for the role, not just the best of 4 CVs that you got through. And it's very hard sometimes to turn around to the other people in the business, or even our talent acquisition team who want to make hires because that's their role. Their role is to bring people in. And then you've got a hiring manager going, yeah, they seem okay, but I'm not sure. I think I'll pass and I'll leave that vacancy open. It's really hard to push that message. But I think it's really important. Absolutely.
Yeah, at the end of the day, you do want to hire the best person for the role.
Yeah. I mean, you must get feedback sometimes where you're like, come on, just, as a recruiter, like, just take that person. It must be right.
Or I just don't get it. And then it's like, okay, well, what's going on? Just tell me if they're the best person of the bunch, but not quite the right person for this role. Like, that's okay. Like, I'm not going to be offended by that. You want me to find someone else? I'm okay with that. It's when there's just no response or no communication. And it kind of touches on a really good experience that I had this week with a new client that we've recently onboarded. And the first thing he said to me was, my main responsibility in this role is hiring. So I have worked with recruitment agencies in the past. I have a responsibility to give you as much information as I possibly can. And for the first time in my career, he actually produced a document, and this document had a breakdown of the roles. And I imagine this is something something similar circulates internally within the business. But he sent it to me, and it had a breakdown of the roles, had a breakdown of the salary expectations. It had a breakdown of on a Google Doc the actual questions that would say this candidate's good or this candidate isn't. Technical questions that, as a recruiter, will really make a difference. He put information about the responsibilities that they will have, the projects they'll be working on, how the teams are broken down, the org chart, everything down to why candidates haven't been successful in the past. Really fine details. Now, this probably took him a lot of time. But in hindsight, he's working, let's say, with 2 or 3 agencies. He's working with an internal recruitment team. He's invested time into creating this document. He doesn't have to keep repeating himself.
Yeah.
We have a very clear mandate of what he's looking for. I am so confident that we can go out and find that very quickly. Whereas I've worked with some really well-established businesses who don't do that. And it's like a guessing game. Like we're out there going, well, is this one good? Could this candidate be of interest? They're like, no, not that one. I'm like, okay, well, why? And nothing. And then I've got to go, well, what about this one? And we might do this for 4 or 5 weeks. And I'm confident that with this new client, we'd have placed someone by then.
Yeah.
Within that time. So it seemed like a lot of investment on his side, but actually, in hindsight, it's really not.
With a document like that, I mean, that sounds amazing. We haven't got that. Again, I'll sort of give a shout out to our internal talent team. They understand. We've got specific tech recruiters, so we have quite a large talent team, and we actually have 2 people dedicated to tech and data. So they understand the problem space that we're in. They understand the ways of working we've got, the systems that we've got. They don't understand the programming side, but they understand, monolith to microservices and what AWS is and Java and all those kind of higher level parts. So they cover off a lot of what some of that document would do. Yeah. However, I do find myself in the first part of the telephone interview kind of describing a ways of working and where we are on the journey right now in this migration. And actually, if we documented it down, I wouldn't have to do that. So actually, I think I'm going to take some of this away.
Yeah, you've done that at least 8 times in the past hires that you've made in 2020. You've done that conversation at least 8 times.
Yeah.
So you did the math. You had that up. I imagine you probably saved yourself a little bit of extra time there. And does that change? I mean, technology changes, right? Projects change, but some of those important parts that you're telling the candidates, and they can make a decision. Also, then the candidate can say, "Well, actually, that's not for me." Then you save the entire time of that potential interview.
Yeah. Now we've been fortunate we're kind of early on our journey into microservices, and we're still sort of cracking away at it. But we talk a lot about the microservices side on the job adverts, and it's kind of it's the sexy side of the engineering, and it's where a lot of people want to be. But I always have to temper it in the telephone chat again to just say, we are on that journey, but we're not fully microservice yet. You will be dealing with legacy code, and I need you to be aware of that, because otherwise you have people coming in going, hooray, I'm going to be a React engineer, and then they're confronted doing some HTML, CSS, and JavaScript, jQuery stuff, and they're like, well, hang on a minute, where's all the cool components and where's all the React stuff and all the microservices? It's like, it's there, but we also need you to do all this other stuff so we can actually get there. And it's partly putting that journey in. And again, I think that's part that, if we had that up front, I've not had anybody who's actually gone, all right, well, fair enough, I'm not interested then. But there will be candidates who won't want to do the older technology, and they do only want to do the new stuff.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah. The millennials, the younger generation all want to work on the cool stuff, right? And actually, there's a huge amount of focus that needs to be put on the legacy stuff. Because that's the foundation of most businesses.
Yeah.
And it needs to be done. It might not be, like you said, it might not be the sexy side of technology, but it's necessary. Interesting. So it's just a document. I was blown away by it the first time I've seen it. At least in depth, it's been written by a technical manager. This business, they have an internal recruitment function, but they partner with external agencies. And he'd had experience working with external agencies and said, I know this helps. And I've looked at it, I've shared it with my team, and very quickly we're going to be able to have some success here.
Yeah, I've only ever seen that once, where a job description was similar to what you laid out, and it explained the structure of the teams, the number of people in the teams, what they were responsible for, diagrams of the architecture, and the deployment architecture, and then sort of discussion about where the company was going and what they were building. I've only ever seen that once in all the job descriptions for stuff I've looked at. And, you know, I look at job descriptions for principal engineers and senior engineers for other companies in the UK to see how they're selling them, to then see, should we be adapting? There's a particular company, Foot Asylum, who do superb job adverts. They're just so open and transparent. They put the salary on there, they put the benefits on there. They're just like, yep, this is what we want you to do. Boom. No messing around at all. And it's like, right, wow, that's a really refreshing approach. And it's something that they've done more recently, I think, and probably based on their development manager, who's really making some good changes there. But yeah, often the job adverts are very vague, and, you know, they don't really tell you much. We try to kind of balance the two, really. So we provide quite a lot of detail in there, but there's certain things that are still kind of like, we're not ready to necessarily lay it all out for the world yet.
You want to sell some of it, right? You still want to get motivated and excited, and you want people to discover new things when you're on the call, and they'll be like, oh wow, this is brilliant, and I'll be more excited than when I read the job description. The cool thing I see, or I've seen a few times, like a business will outlay what the first 90 days looks like on a job description, so you have a real expectation of what you're going to be walking into. I don't know if you'd want to explain that we've got to try and get you a laptop, not those kind of details, but just what it looks like in terms of what they'll be learning, their responsibilities and that kind of stuff. But yeah, saving some of it for the hiring process makes a lot of sense as well.
Yeah.
Interesting. So it sounds like as a hiring manager, the main focus is hiring. And how do we get that message out there to other hiring managers? Like, what? I
don't know. I mean, one of the problems I think we have with engineering managers, I guess, or software engineering managers, and based on what we said earlier on, was, you know, they've progressed up the ladder and have become a manager, but don't really want to. And often, you know, software engineering is quite a solitary job, can suit introverted people quite well. And then if they become that manager role, to then start talking to strangers, basically on the phone, and then face to face or on Zoom calls, and then asking them difficult questions, and, you know, probing into somebody's technical knowledge and stuff, and then maybe even having discussions around salary negotiation or those kind of awkward conversations. It's stuff that you just want to pull away from. It's not stuff you'd want to do. It's not natural. So I don't know how you actually, you know, people need to know that it's important, but then how do you actually get somebody to then go, right, I'm going to grit my teeth and get on with it?
So I think a business should be driving it. This is where the business has a responsibility, right? When you promote someone into being a manager, don't just expect them to be a great manager. Like, figure out that actually this person, if they're certainly coming from an engineering background, might be quite introvert. So how about you start training them on the soft skills, about how to communicate with non-technical people, about how to, or at least to understand or strategize around hiring. Like, these people haven't done it before. So, you know, I found myself personally in management roles or leadership roles, and I was leading from the front from a sales perspective. And it's like, okay, well, you're going to make a great manager. And in the short term, I just wasn't. I was like, okay, well, you just do what I do. I guess just copy me.
Yeah.
and it doesn't go down like that. Everyone's different. Everyone has a different way of responding. And it took me time to figure that out. But if a business has a plan in place, a real structured plan to make someone a good manager, teaching them how to interview, teaching them how to understand people and their emotions, because that's another part of it, right?
Yes.
A part that's just not looked at enough when people move into management.
Yeah. I mean, that's one of the reasons why I rotate the people in the interview process. Yeah. So, you know, if there's often myself and then 2 to 3 other engineers, it'll be, right, okay, I'll rotate one of them out and I'll bring a new person in almost as an observer, so they can see how we're interviewing. So that, and then now what I've started to do is say, right, okay, you're much more suited to interview that candidate, Pete. So why don't you do the telephone interview chat? Are you okay with that? Like, yeah, I know what we do now. I've witnessed it. I've seen it. Whereas if you just ask somebody fresh to do that, they'd be like, what you want me to do the initial call to a candidate? No way, I'm not doing that. But once you've involved them in the process a bit, then you can start, you know, it's that kind of delegation. You train them a bit, show them how you want it done. And everyone hires differently. Everyone's interview process is different. it's all based on the people in the interview, really, that the process as such. So it's just trying to show people how this is how I interview and this is how I want us to interview as best as we can, and then starting to rotate people around so that they can carry on, so that when the number of candidates starts dramatically increasing, which then means I would be a single point of failure and that bottleneck that we discussed, it won't be the case, because I've trained a number of people on how to do it. Then they can start bringing people in. I mean, I'd love it if actually I could pick any 3 of my engineers out of the 40 and say, can you do this interview, please? That'd be brilliant. Just say, right, because then you haven't got any resourcing issues and you've got no timescale problems.
Yep.
Because 3 people, they'd be easy to get 3 out of 40 who can make a 3 o'clock on a Tuesday afternoon.
Yeah, absolutely.
So that's kind of where I want to take it. That's my kind of overall plan.
And then that's important for you to then create the benefits to that individual of why building these soft skills, or where that could take them in their career. Because it's super important as well to remember that these people are the face of your business. So if you throw someone in who's not trained, inexperienced, nervous, worried, all of the above, and they're the first person that someone sees when they're trying to join the team, that could be the difference between someone wanting to join the business and not. Yeah,
absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, one of the things that we did recently with an engineering lead interview part, so we did all the process that we discussed, including the kind of technical hour and the face-to-face. And then I said, right, so then the talent team were like, right, are we ready to offer? And I'm like, we are, but actually I want him to meet the team. So, can you get the delivery lead? Can you get the product owner? Can you get a couple of the engineers and maybe one of the testers, and just line up a half an hour chat for them to just have a chat? I said, it's not an interview. Don't forward the CV. I'm not going to be involved. I'm not in that process. Just want them to have a chat to meet the team, so that engineering lead can say, yeah, actually, I want to work with these people, or no, I can't see it working. Now, I was advised against it, because I have been told, the more people you involve in an interview process, the more likely the overall answer will be no to the candidate. But I decided to ignore that advice, because I've used this technique before in a previous job that we were hiring for, and it worked really well. But that's a tricky one, because at that point you're ready to hire them and you want them to come in, so you almost don't want to give them a reason to not want to come in. But also, you don't want one of the other team members who might just be having a bit of an off day saying, no, they won't fit because they're having a bit of a bad time. So it is a dangerous part, but yeah.
Yeah, it's interesting you say that. So I always find, and again, from personal experience and processes that work well, when a hiring manager is focused on finding reasons for a candidate to be hired, as opposed to finding reasons for them not to be hired, they see way more success. And then second to that point, where I have a client who at the last stage has 15 individuals you have to meet, 15 people. Wow. And then they have an aggregate scoring system that if X amount score under 7, let's say, out of 10, then that candidate's not successful. But when you talk about 15 people, and let's say, I don't know, 3 of them are having a bad day and they all score a 4, or for example, those particular 3 people really aren't aligned technically with what this person's coming in to talk about. So they really don't have an understanding of what it is that they're doing. They're there to give different perspectives, but it can give an unfair result. And if everyone else is saying yes, but these 3 people say no and give bad scores because they just don't understand, or for whatever reason, like, you might have just lost a great candidate there. So yeah, keeping it compact, trusting your employees and your team to be able to actually be involved and make decisions in the process empowers them as well.
Yeah,
which is really important.
I wasn't ready though for if they turned around and said, no, we don't like him, because so I wasn't quite sure what I was going to do if they said, nah, it doesn't seem suitable, because
anyway, can you?
Yeah, I didn't want to overrule at that point. So I was fingers crossed under the desk, and they said, yeah, seems like a good fit. So yeah, didn't have to go there.
Yeah. All right. Well, you got lucky, should we say?
Yeah. Yeah.
Interesting. So look, I think we should probably wrap this up. I just want to kind of get a summary from you, Andrew, in terms of your perception or how you perceive the benefits of being a forward-facing hiring manager that actually has hiring at the forefront of their mind. Like, what are the benefits?
benefits is you end up with a very strong, capable engineering team, and you know them. You were involved, you know them, you know who's on your team, and also, when you come to figuring out which team do they need to go in, you can make that decision. You've already got a rough idea of their skill set and their sort of experience level of stuff, so you know what projects they can work on. Whereas, if you've outsourced some of that or you've not been involved, then you can't make those decisions. But at the end of the day, you're growing a very capable team. Your success is based on the strength of your engineers and the success of the engineers. It's not based on how much engineering you try and do or can do or whatever. It's based on what they do and their output. And it's really, really important that you've got strong, great engineers on your team. And one way to ensure that is to be involved in that process. That's if you're skilled and know what you're looking at. But hopefully, as an engineering manager, you've got some of those skills, because that's why you are where you are.
Yeah. Absolutely, that's brilliant. Investing time in the process saves time and money long term.
Yeah, absolutely.
I would say. So, it's been a pleasure. Really, really good chat, and I think we probably could be talking about this subject for a while. So we're going to be sharing this over the next few weeks. If people have some time to be watching this during the holidays, please give us your feedback. Let us know what you think. If you have opposing opinions on hiring managers and whether they should focus on hiring or not, I'm very interested to hear what you've got to say, because I'm just going to disagree with you if you say hiring isn't a responsibility of a hiring manager. I'm interested in what you've got to say. And yeah, look, I hope you guys have a fantastic 21 for everybody, including yourself, Andrew, and your team over there. So thanks for your time, and happy holidays.
Thank you very much, Lewis, and thank you for everyone who's attending as well. Thank you so much.
Awesome. Cheers, Andrew.
Cheers. Thank you.